Thunder slammed the night like a door. And then came the knock. "Liam, it's Sophie from next door." Power was out. The hallway was a tunnel. Her voice carried a calm I didn't have. I opened to a silhouette in a raincoat. A dead phone in her hand. Rain on her eyelashes. "Do you have a flashlight?" I didn't know. I just opened the door to my future. I was 23, new to this quiet suburb. First job in tech. A couch that groaned, walls still blank. I saved receipts in a shoebox, called my mother on Sundays, and told myself solitude was discipline. Mostly it was just quiet. Sophie was 32 and lived across the shared wall. I learned that in minutes while handing her my only flashlight. The beam caught the rain on her coat and the patient worry in her eyes. Our building's generator had quit. She tried the pull cord and lost. "Let's try together," I said. And we stepped into a rain that smelled like clean pavement and cold metal. At the generator I braced, pulled once, twice, 3 times. The engine coughed awake. Sophie laughed bright over the drone, surprised like someone who hadn't expected good news. Porch lights blinked on that thin glow. I noticed a small freckle near her left cheekbone and the way she bit her lip when thinking. We lingered under the eave because people do that when weather turns strangers into allies. She asked about my work and actually listened. I learned she was a school counselor, good at keeping other people's secrets, bad at taking days off. When the rain eased, we walked back beneath one umbrella she insisted I take. On my threshold, she touched my sleeve. A small unplanned thank you that steadied more than electricity. "If you need anything, knock," she said. And when she closed her door, she glanced back as if saving a picture for later. The generator hummed through the wall all night like a neighbor's heartbeat. I told myself I was thinking about deadlines. I knew better. Morning gave me an excuse. The flashlight. I returned it with spare batteries. She opened with coffee and the easy brightness of someone who chooses kindness. "Come in a minute." Her place felt lived in. Plants, dog-eared books, a record player waiting for power. A photo on the shelf showed her at the ocean with 2 grinning students. A bowl of blueberries on the counter matched the story she told about eating them by the handful during report week. We traded small things that felt larger than they sounded. Rent prices, a squeaky gate, the school carnival that always ran out of napkins. I told a clumsy story about a botched demo at work. She laughed until she covered her mouth, then laughed at covering her mouth. When I left, she walked me to the door and without thinking, smoothed the rain-wrinkled collar of my jacket. It was a quick touch, ordinary almost, but the room went soft around it. Days settled into crossings. I pretended not to count. She left a slice of blueberry pie on my porch with a note. "Trade you for a good story." And I slid a thank you under her mat with a story about spilling coffee into a server and surviving it. Our windows lit in the evenings like 2 halves of the same quiet. I tried to label her in my head. Kind neighbor, older friend, safe distance, and the labels wouldn't stick. The wrong note came on a Saturday. A sedan idled too long at the curb. A man stepped out with an expensive watch and a practiced way of standing that suggested doors opened for him. He walked straight to Sophie's steps and pressed the bell. Sound carries in careful neighborhoods. His voice was controlled enough to sound polite, sharp enough to cut if it needed to. I moved back from the window and told myself it wasn't my business. The air felt like a string drawn too tight. Sophie opened, shoulders squared, chin lifted. They spoke in short, precise sentences, the kind people use when the past is heavy. He gestured with the hand where a ring wasn't. She folded her arms and didn't move aside. For a heartbeat, she glanced in my direction. Maybe at the tree outside, maybe at nothing. And I felt both seen and safely hidden. He left with a line I couldn't hear. She stood on the step a moment, fingers to her temple. Rain beginning again like a reminder, then went inside and let the house swallow the rest. That night, I turned off my lamp and listened to the generators thrum through the wall. I told myself not to build a future from a freckle, a laugh in the rain, and a borrowed umbrella. I told myself I didn't know her story. The truth rose anyway, simple and stubborn. She lived next door, and I wanted to be the kind of neighbor who showed up when the lights went out. And maybe if the world allowed it, something braver than that, I told myself it would fade. That quiet pull whenever I saw her car in the driveway or heard her laugh through the wall didn't. It only deepened the way a song grows familiar yet somehow sharper each time. Weeks slipped by until one Thursday evening, Sophie waved me over from her porch. She held a casserole dish wrapped in a towel, said she'd made too much. I laughed, said I could return the favor with overcooked pasta. Deal. She smiled, and just like that, dinner became a habit neither of us named. Inside her house, the air smelled like basil and something softer, something warm that didn't belong to spices. We ate by the kitchen window where the light was golden and honest. I told her about the chaos at my office, about learning to survive adult life one broken appliance at a time. She listened, eyes steady, lips curved in that half-smile that told me she wasn't just hearing. She understood. When the dishes were done, we sat with tea and she asked, "Do you ever feel like you started life too early?" I said, "Maybe I just started lonely." Her laugh broke the heaviness, but not completely. She said she'd been divorced for 2 years. He wasn't cruel, she said, just absent like furniture you stop noticing. I nodded because I knew that kind of absence even at 23. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence felt like something alive between us. We met again the next weekend. I fixed her porch light. She baked cookies she swore were store-bought quality, then blushed when I said they were better. She teased that I was too young to be flattering a woman her age. "You're 32, not ancient," I said. "You say that now," she answered. But there was a spark in her eyes that hadn't been there before. That night, thunder rolled in from the hills again. She texted, "Lights out. You around?" I grabbed the flashlight and crossed the wet yard. She was on her porch in a sweater, hair loose, laughing at how cursed her generator was. We stood shoulder to shoulder under the eave as rain angled across the streetlights. "You know," she said, "I used to love storms. Now they just feel loud." I told her maybe they were reminders to listen, not hide. She looked at me then, close enough that I saw the reflection of the lightning in her pupils. The thunder cracked and she flinched. I don't know who moved first, but suddenly my hand was on hers. Just that. Skin warm against skin, the kind of touch that could still be explained if anyone asked. She didn't pull away. The rain softened to a hush. Then, as if testing a truth, she leaned her head lightly against my shoulder. My heart stumbled into a rhythm I didn't recognize. When the lights flickered back on, she stepped away, half smiling. "I guess you fixed it again," she whispered. I wanted to say not really, that I hadn't fixed anything, only made the silence louder. But she was already turning the key to her door. "Good night, Liam." "Good night, Sophie." After that night, things shifted. We still waved from our driveways, still talked about weather and work, but there was something else in the pauses, something waiting. She invited me to dinner again as a thank you. The table was smaller this time, candles instead of bulbs. She wore a blue dress that matched the late summer dusk. Halfway through the meal, she said, "You're easy to talk to. That's dangerous." I asked why and she said softly, "Because people like you make me forget. I'm supposed to be careful." My pulse tripped. I told her I didn't want to make her forget anything, just to remember that she deserved to feel alive. She looked down, tracing the rim of her glass. "You really are too young for this kind of talk." "Maybe," I said, "but it's honest." After dessert, we stepped outside. The air was heavy with the scent of wet grass. She brushed a strand of hair from her face and thanked me for coming. I said I'd see her tomorrow. And when I turned to leave, she caught my wrist, gentle, uncertain. And for the briefest heartbeat, she kissed me. Just a touch of warmth, quick and real. She whispered, "That didn't happen." I smiled. "Of course not." We stood there, two neighbors pretending the world hadn't just tilted a little closer. But when I got home, I could still feel the ghost of her lips and the thunder of my own heart. The next morning, gossip came early. Miss Linda, our overly curious neighbor, saw Sophie on my porch and decided truth was optional. By evening, 2 people had already heard things. Sophie stopped by, eyes worried. "We need to be careful," she said. "People love stories that aren't theirs." I agreed, though every cell in me wanted to tell her I didn't care. She sighed. Promise me we'll keep this between us. I nodded. For now, I said. She looked relieved and somehow sad. As she walked away, the sunlight caught the curve of her shoulder, and I thought, secrets might protect us, but they can also trap us. That night, her light went off early. I stayed awake longer than I should have, watching the faint glow through her curtains fade, wondering if she was thinking about the same impossible thing I was. That maybe love doesn't ask permission even when the world is watching. The secret made everything sharper. The way she said my name, the soft pause before a smile, the careful distance we both tried to keep. Days blurred into late summer evenings, each one circling the same quiet gravity pulling us closer. I told myself it was simple friendship. Lies are easier when they sound gentle. Sophie and I started walking after dinner down the curved street where the trees arched like an old chapel. We talked about everything and nothing. Her students, my stubborn boss, the small ways people lose and find themselves. Sometimes our hands brushed and the air seemed to hold its breath. One evening she invited me in for tea. The lights were low. A record hummed from the corner. Something old and slow. She leaned against the counter, her hair unpinned, eyes catching the lamplight. You look exhausted, she said. I told her I'd had a long day. She poured my tea. Then her voice softened. You know, I forget how young you are sometimes. You say that like it's a flaw. No, she smiled faintly, like it's something dangerous. That night, we talked until the clock forgot its job. When I finally stood to leave, she walked me to the door. Her shoulder brushed mine, and for a moment we just stood there. Nothing happened, but everything nearly did. The next morning, reality reminded us we didn't live in a storybook. At the corner cafe, I saw her talking to a man, tall, tidy, a new teacher at her school. His hand lingered a second too long on her arm. I told myself it didn't matter, but it did. Later that day, she came by holding a folder. He's just a colleague, she said before I could ask. Then why explain? I said too quickly. Her eyes flicked up. Hurt, tired. Because I don't want misunderstandings to ruin what we have. We stood in the silence that follows truth. She looked away first. Liam, people are starting to talk. Miss Linda has been asking questions. The school board already heard something. My stomach tightened. You didn't tell them. Of course not. But I can't risk losing my job over whispers. I wanted to say I understood. But jealousy and pride are terrible editors. So what are we? I asked quietly. She hesitated. We're two people who care about each other more than we should. That line stung worse than any goodbye. She stepped closer, almost reaching for my hand, then thought better of it. Please, let's just keep some distance for a while. For a few days, I tried to follow her request. I threw myself into work, went running until my lungs burned, told myself space was the mature thing. But maturity doesn't silence the sound of her laughter bleeding through the wall, or stop my hand from hesitating on her name in my phone. When the weekend came, I saw her at the grocery store. She was alone, hair tied back, face bare of makeup, looking beautiful in that effortless way people do when they've stopped trying. Our eyes met between the aisles. She smiled small, apologetic, and walked over. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said. You didn't. I lied. She exhaled. My ex called again. He heard rumors. He's not taking it well. I felt anger rise. Protective. Reckless. If he bothers you. No, she interrupted, shaking her head. I can handle him. But this thing between us, Liam, it makes everything harder. Maybe it's supposed to, I said. She looked at me like I just spoke in a language she wanted to forget. Later that night, I saw headlights in her driveway, the same black sedan. The man stepped out, her ex. I stayed by my window, fists clenched. He stood on her porch too long. Their voices rose, muffled, but sharp. Then silence. He left. Sophie stood there for a while, arms folded, head bowed. I almost went out but stopped because what could I be really? The young neighbor who didn't know his place. The next morning, she didn't wave. Her car was gone early. Days passed like that, quiet, heavy. Even Miss Linda's gossip lost its edge. I started to think maybe the moment had ended, that whatever we'd been was over. Then one evening, I came home to find an envelope taped to my door. Inside a note in her neat, slanted handwriting. Thank you for the light. I don't know what tomorrow looks like, but tonight I needed to remember you. There was a pressed violet between the pages. I stood there, heart caught somewhere between regret and hope. I wanted to run next door to say that secrets don't scare me, that I didn't care what people thought, but I didn't. I just held the note and watched the porch light flicker through the thin curtains separating our homes. The same light that started everything. And deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. It was only the pause before something neither of us could hide from much longer. I didn't see her for 3 days after the note. 3 days of silence from the other side of the wall that used to hum with her music, her laughter, her life. I tried to convince myself it was better that way. But when someone has already taken root in your thoughts, distance doesn't quiet them. It only makes the noise inside louder. On the 4th evening, I was fixing a loose hinge on my door when I heard raised voices outside. I looked up and there he was again, the same man, the ex. He stood on Sophie's porch, his body language sharp, full of ownership that didn't belong to him anymore. Sophie's voice carried through the twilight, calm but trembling at the edges. You can't just show up like this, she said. He took a step closer. I didn't think. I just walked over. Is everything okay? I asked, keeping my voice steady. The man turned, his jaw tight. And who are you? He snapped. A friend, I said. Sophie put a hand up between us, her eyes pleading. But not for me to leave, for me to stay calm. Go home, Liam, she said softly. Please. But he laughed, a dry mocking sound. So this is him? The kid next door. That word kid cut deep, but I bit it back. He looked at Sophie again. You traded me for this? Sophie's voice broke then just slightly. I didn't trade anyone. I just stopped living in the past. He glared at her, then at me, and for a moment I thought he'd swing. Instead, he spat something under his breath, turned, and stormed off to his car. Tires screeched down the street. Sophie stood there frozen, one arm around herself like she was holding everything in place. I stepped forward, hesitant. Are you okay? She nodded, then shook her head, then whispered, I'm so tired, Liam. I wanted to pull her into my arms right there. But I didn't. Not until she took that half step toward me first, and then it wasn't about rules or age or rumors. It was about two people who had spent too long pretending they didn't need anyone. I held her while she cried quietly against my chest, the porch light flickering above us. Later inside, she made tea neither of us drank. I shouldn't have let you get involved, she said. You didn't let me. I chose to. She smiled faintly. That's the problem. You always choose the right thing at the wrong time. We talked for hours about fear, about second chances, about how the heart doesn't care what people think it's supposed to feel. When I told her I'd been offered a job in another city, a big opportunity, her expression changed. That's wonderful, she said too quickly. You should take it. I asked if that's what she really wanted. She didn't answer. By midnight, I stood at her door again, suitcase half-packed in my head. If I leave, I said, it won't be because I stopped caring. She reached out, fingers brushing mine. Then don't leave yet, she whispered. Not tonight. The storm started again, sudden and heavy. We sat by the window, watching the rain smear the street lights into gold streaks. Her hand found mine. No words, just warmth. The world outside could have ended right then, and I don't think either of us would have noticed. When I finally got up to go, she followed me to the door. Her face caught between light and shadow. Liam, she began. And then before the sentence found its ending, she kissed me soft, real, a question and an answer at once. When we broke apart, she said, I love you. There, I said it. Now go before I lose my courage. I didn't go far. I stood in the rain for a long time, staring at her door, every drop colder than the last. The next morning, the world felt strangely quiet. She didn't come by. I didn't knock. I drove to the office, told my boss I'd take the new job. That night, I packed. The silence from her house pressed against the walls like air before a storm. Around midnight, there was another knock, soft, uncertain. I opened the door and she was standing there, hair wet, eyes red from crying. "You're leaving tomorrow?" she asked. "Yeah." She took a breath that sounded like it hurt. "Then I needed to see you once more just to say thank you for reminding me what it feels like to be seen." I wanted to tell her to come with me, to leave everything behind, but I didn't. Because love isn't always about escape. It's about choosing when to stay. I lifted her hand, kissed it lightly, and said, "I'll be back someday." She smiled. The kind of smile you remember in the quiet years that follow. "Then I'll keep the porch light on," she whispered. That night I couldn't sleep. The sound of rain returned soft on the windows, carrying her scent, her voice, everything I didn't want to forget. And as the sky began to pale, I realized something simple and devastating. Leaving her wouldn't make the feeling go away. It would only teach me how deep it really went. 5 years have passed since that night. Sometimes I still hear the rain from that porch in my sleep. The rhythm that marked the end of what I thought was a chapter and the beginning of what turned out to be a life. I never did move far. The job in the city lasted a year. I climbed a few rungs, bought better suits, got used to pretending that ambition filled the same space love once did. Didn't. I drive back some weekends telling myself it was just nostalgia, that I wanted to see the old neighborhood, but really I was looking for the glow of her porch light stayed on always. One September afternoon, I parked across from the house and saw her in the yard trimming roses. Her hair was shorter, a little lighter from the sun, and she looked content in a way that made my chest ache. She turned, saw me, and froze for half a heartbeat. Then that same soft smile, the one that used to undo every defense I had. "You came back," she said, voice steady, but eyes shining. "I told you I would," I answered. We stood there, awkward as strangers, close as memories. She invited me in. The house smelled of lemon oil and paper. The same books, the same couch, but everything felt calmer. Sure, she'd repainted the kitchen. The wall where we once talked until dawn was now a soft blue. "I thought you'd hate it," she teased. "It's perfect," I said. Over coffee we filled in the years. She changed schools, started counseling for teens. Said it made her feel useful again. I told her about the city, the noise, the way success can be lonely when you have no one to share it with. She listened, nodding, hands wrapped around her mug like she was warming herself on the story. At one point, she asked, "Did you ever stop thinking about us?" I laughed quietly. I tried, failed miserably. She exhaled, a slow, trembling breath, and looked down. I never stopped either. There was a long pause, the kind that decides everything. Then she reached across the table, brushed her fingers against mine. "You're still the same," she said. "Maybe a little taller in spirit." I smiled. "And you're still the bravest person I've ever known." We walked after that down the same street that once held our secret. The neighborhood had changed. New fences, new families, but under the golden light, it felt timeless. She told me her ex had moved out of state. The gossip had faded, replaced by quiet respect. "Funny," she said, "how people stop talking once you stop hiding." When we reached her porch, she hesitated. "You still leaving again?" she asked. I shook my head. "Not this time. I'm tired of running from good things." She smiled, eyes glistening. "Then stay. Not just tonight. Stay." I didn't answer with words. I stepped forward, and she leaned into me, her forehead resting against mine. The kiss that followed wasn't new or sudden. It was the continuation of every unfinished sentence we'd ever shared. Months later, we married quietly in her backyard under the oak tree that had seen every version of us. Neighbors, friends, almost lovers, and finally something permanent. Miss Linda brought pie and cried through the vows. The sky was clear. No thunder, just sunlight soft enough to bless everything it touched. Now every morning I watch Sophie in the kitchen humming while the coffee brews, her hair catching the light like it's made of memory. Sometimes she catches me staring and laughs saying, "You still look at me like I'm the best thing that ever happened to you." And I always tell her the truth. You are. We still live in the same 2 houses, though the wall between us doesn't mean much anymore. She jokes that I'm technically still her neighbor. just from the other side of the bed. I laugh every time because that's exactly how it feels. And when it rains, we still sit on that porch with one blanket and one cup of tea, listening to the storm like an old friend. The world has quieted around us, but inside, everything still moves. The laughter, the warmth, the miracle of two lives that refuse to stop reaching for each other. That's my true story. She was my neighbor and now she's my wife.